Hi, good morning. My name is Nick DiGiulio. I am the Executive VP of Sales at POI Business Interiors. Thanks for making the effort this morning to spend time with us. POI and Steelcase are pleased to be able to have over 300 of POI's clients attending the session this morning. Today's topic is going to be about navigating what's next, bringing back the office. And it's timely that we're having this discussion as states and provinces are making their first moves to open up their economies. What does that mean? It means people are going to be going back to the office. And there's so much information flying around out there, a lot of clutter. We're happy to share Steelcase's findings based on research and science. We are privileged to have a number of Steelcase presenters today. Bianca Berry will be our host, and our presenters will be Christine Congdon, who's the editor of Steelcase's 360 magazine, Meg Bennett, design manager at Steelcase Applications Marketing Design Studio, and Gail Moutry, global VP, brand experience and workplace innovation. And this is meant to be an interactive session. So the team will be presenting, but they're also really wanting to answer your questions. So in the top right of your screen, you'll see that there's a box where you can type in your questions, and you can do it anonymously as well. So if you click the anonymous button, you're going to ask an anonymous question. So again, welcome. Thanks for being here. And I'll introduce Gail Moutry, who will kick it off.
Thank you, Nick. And good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to my office/studio/laundry room. And we want to thank POI for inviting us here today. So as Nick said, we really hope that this is a session that allows you to ask us all the things that you're thinking about and allows us to share with you some of the things that we're learning. And I thought in advance of opening up the Q&A that I might just set up for a few minutes the point of view that we have on all of this. And as you're seeing on the screen right now, the idea of helping understand what it means to get people back to the office safely. This is actually something that we started to think about maybe 2 weeks into this experience. I mean, I've literally been sitting in this office/studio/laundry room for probably 9 weeks now. And like a lot of business leaders, spent the first 2 weeks thinking about what it meant to send our people home and put a pause on the things that our factories were making. But then, as I say, about 2 weeks into that, some of us, myself, because I do lead the innovation team, we thought we needed to start thinking about what will happen as we start to think about returning to the workplace, think about going back to the office, and we think about the question that's on everyone's mind. What is it that we're all going to have to do to get people back there safely? So, Andrew, if I may ask you to just advance the slide. Nick alluded to this when he did his introduction, that there's a lot of stuff out there. And like you, we've been reading all of it. And there's so much that's out there that it's actually really hard right now to know how to navigate your way through this. Some of what we read is brilliant. It's really good. Some of it's not so brilliant. And unfortunately, right now, a lot of it is just based on people's opinions or conjecture about what may happen, because the sad reality right now is none of us actually knows. And so for us, determining how we could be of help was to say, could we help all of the customers and designers and influencers that we work with really position for them some of the things that we think you should be thinking about right now, and things that we believe are based on being highly responsible about what we share, about not moving forward with conjecture, about really operating on the basis of all the things that we know to be true right now, but also being prepared to add as quickly as we can new things that we're learning. So Andrew, if I can ask you just to let everybody see, this is just a view for you of a guide that we put together. What you're looking at there is just the cover of that guide, which is available to any of you. You can download that guide through the URL that you see there, or anybody at POI or Steelcase will happily send the guide to you. But in that, one more, Andrew, thank you. What I would like to do is, you can read through the guide, But what I want to do is take a few minutes just to set up our point of view on how we did this. And really, our point of view is based on 3 key constructs or foundations that we are using right now to figure out what are the things that we need to be thinking about on behalf of our own organization, but on behalf of everybody that we work with. And these are the things that you'll see ideas and considerations within the guide, but this is also the framework for how we are thinking about this, and we're thinking about what we need to be doing in order to help everybody. So the first one is this idea that we really do believe you need to look at the time horizon of now, near, and far. And now, near, and far is going to differ. It's going to differ geographically, regionally, or even organization by organization. So what we mean by the now is really the more immediate. There are parts of the world, our offices in China have already gone back to the workplace. It's happening this week in Germany and some other countries. And then, there will be this rolling return to work, not only as it happens organization by organization, but also, as it happens within that organization. So the idea of saying, here are some things that you could look at now, here are the things that we think you should be thinking about in the near, and then understanding what we all need to be thinking about for the far is one of the things that we're working on just as aggressively as we can. So what you'll see on that slide is we've also paired now with the idea of retrofitting. And as we do start to return to offices or the workplace, quickly putting things in place on the basis of how many people you have going through that rolling return if they're moving back in shifts, and thinking about how you can quickly retrofit based on what we know now. And I mean, what we know now is as good as the World Health Organization and governmental guidelines can give us. And so, our thoughts on what you need to do is based on the things that we all understand to be true at the moment. Now you can see as we start to look at what we believe the near might be, that may be more than retrofitting, and that may actually be looking at how you reconfigure environments. And reconfiguration may have to happen because we're simply not going to be able to put the number of people that we may have once had into a space designed, or not designed rather, for some of the things that we have to consider now, like physical distancing and so on. So what you're seeing in between those words, near and reconfigure, is when we believe organizations may start to think about, how do I bring 80 to maybe even 100% of my workforce back into a certain environment? And what we are working on right now is the very best we can to see what science-based and data-driven knowledge we can gather. And so we will have more to tell you about this in the coming weeks and months, but we're engaging with some world-renowned epidemiologists who are going to help us understand better what are the science-based facts that all of us need to think about as we do our best to create work environments where people are safer. And then for the far, we really believe right now that's where we'll be thinking about reinvention. And a lot of the planning paradigms that we have used up until now, they're not going to be able to be true as we think about the things that we're all going to want to do in the workplace. Are we going to want a work environment that the next time this happens to us, which unfortunately it may, are we going to have work environments where we can respond faster than we were able to this time? So, as you see from the words there, we know that as we move into the far, we'll be able to take all the things that we understand right now that matter to people and the kinds of environments we want to create for those people, but we'll be able to add the layer that science is going to bring us, and then also the emerging technologies that are coming out right now. We know there will be building systems, there will be applications or apps on our smart devices and phones, and a lot of other things that we're thinking about building into actual physical products that are going to help us understand the kind of environment that we want to start to set up or create for the future, so that again, we feel prepared when things may change. So Andrew, if you can click to the next one. Here is the second thing that we believe is useful for everyone to use, and it's the design considerations that as you look at your current spaces or you think about the near and even the far, there's really these 3 principles or constructs that we think you could use, and that's looking at the density of the space. In other words, the number of people you have per square meter, square foot. It's also thinking about the geometry of the space. because how you configure the way people, actually the way workstations and furniture and meeting spaces and cafes, how you configure those is how you'll end up configuring the people. And there is definitely a way that geometry can help protect us a little bit, or help to suppress a little bit some of the pathogens or some of the things that may be transmitted through situations like the one we're in right now. And then the other one is division, and actually thinking about places where you do need to have physical barriers between people, you know, whether they're on desks or their panels or their screens. But we think it's that combination of density, geometry, and division that's actually going to help us think through the way our spaces need to look. And then the third one is still the importance of well-being. And those of you who have worked with POI and Steelcase over the years know that we have talked about well-being for a long time. We talk about needing to understand the integration of physical, cognitive, and emotional well-being, and that stays the same. It's just there's a new dimension that we've just added right now, and it's that dimension of safety. And unless we think about how to help our environments be safer and actually feel safer for the people who are working there, if we don't do that, we're never going to achieve the kind of emotional and cognitive well-being that we all need to get back to the workplace and open up our economy again. So the last one that I wanted to share with you is just a view of the first 2 pages that are inside this guide. And I wanted to share these because, first of all, it does express our commitment to everybody that at a time when things are changing so quickly and there are so many uncertainties or unknowns, that our commitment is to keep sharing what we learn just as fast as we can. And this guide is one vehicle that we'll use to keep sharing what we're learning. And there's a message in there from our CEO, and I won't read through it right now, but I will suggest that maybe you do, because I hope that in the roles that you all play, there may be some thoughts or ideas or even some sound bites in there that would help you. And, you know, he really does express the fact that we believe the workplace matters more than ever. Yes, there will be more people working at home more than we may have before, but the things that we're going to need to do as we start to go back to the workplace are the things that are going to help us regain the productivity that we may have lost over the last handful of months. So again, I would just encourage you when you get some time to take a look at that, and I hope that it helps. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Bianca, who's going to kick off our Q&A session.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining today. So we're really excited to kick off the Q&A. As Nick outlined in the beginning, what you'll see on the right is an opportunity to enter in your questions. You can either enter it in with your full name or anonymously. We already have a few, so I'm going to start off the question period, and I'm going to be able to toggle back and forth between many of the awesome panelists we have here today. So first, as a kind of housekeeping question I see here, somebody asked if we can provide the website link where we can access the guide. And of course, we actually have the link answered in the question directly, but we can make sure that we send out the guide and the link to our post-COVID site to everybody here on the call afterwards. So the second question we had is, can you expand on what ideas and considerations would have to be taken with the now, near, and far concept? So I think that's a good question for Chris Congdon, so I'm going to pass it over to her and she will be able to expand.
Chris, you're on mute.
I'm sorry, everyone. I was on mute. I'll start over again. And thank you to Bianca. And thank you for the question. With Bill and Meg, a number of others, our team at Steelcase did a lot of research and thinking about these 3 time horizons. And the reason we thought about it in this way is because things are changing almost every day, it feels like. And so we really wanted to give some good thought to, you know, what do people need to do right now, in the immediate moment, and then to think a little bit further out once we have more information, then to even go further out and say, okay, what are the long-term ramifications and impact of experiencing a pandemic? So if we could move forward, Andrew, I'll talk a little bit about some thinking for the now. And as Gail had explained earlier, in the moment, retrofitting, like working with what you've got already, is probably the best approach. And again, this will vary from organization to organization, but some things that we would suggest that you have conversations about, one would be about the density within your workspace. So a lot of that is going to mean, of course, as Gail said, this rolling re-entry into the workplace. So part of reducing density, of course, would be bringing people back in waves or in different patterns. Some organizations are looking at having teams, if you will, that come in, an A team or a B team that work. But in addition to that, in physical spaces, we could begin to think about potentially just removing some furniture. I think that's a pretty common sense idea, or starting to use different kinds of patternings, whether it's like a checkerboard kind of setup where you have people that are not directly across from each other, but on a diagonal, or other kinds of ways to be able to give people who are in the office more space. With the idea of geometry, again, that's, as Gail was showing on that plan view, you can begin to think about rearranging or just reorienting how people are oriented within the space. So we're reducing more of that face-to-face kind of interaction for a while is a thing to think about. So maybe just rotating freestanding desks is a way to think about that, or just kind of rethinking the standard linear approach that a lot of times we've taken in order to get more people into the workplace. And then division in the near term, you know, there's a lot of different ways that organizations could consider that, particularly if it's going to be difficult to achieve that 2 meter distance between each other. One would be to add screens or panels just to be able to help separate people. Some things to think about would be certainly screens in the front, but also alongside of you, and maybe even a little bit behind, just to be able to give people that sense of security that maybe there's not somebody who's directly behind me as I'm working. If you can move on, Andrew, thank you, to the next slide. Some other things to think about, you know, organizations that have done hoteling, maybe we have to rethink hoteling. Maybe it has to be more like a real hotel, in the sense that rather than having people come in and out of the space throughout the day, that maybe you book a space and it's yours to use for a period of time, and then it gets cleaned afterwards before the next person would use it. And this idea of a behavior shift toward the idea of cleaning in or cleaning out. We think about that for people who go to a gym. You know, you think about the equipment that you're using at the gym and cleaning it first and cleaning it after. Maybe we need to start thinking about that and encouraging those behaviors in the workplace. We've also thought a little bit about ancillary spaces, you know, in the now, like maybe we have to encourage behavior to just have larger lounge pieces used for single seating, or to be able to, again, because it's freestanding, should be relatively easy to move some of those things apart. And of course, as Gail said, working at home is going to be an option for some organizations. Some will go faster in terms of bringing people back into the workplace, but others might take longer and use the work at home strategy as another way to be able to help kind of manage that, which means people who are working at home for a longer period of time, like for me, it was always kind of a temporary thing, and I kind of took over my son's old bedroom, and I still haven't redecorated or turned it into a proper office, but at least I have a good ergonomic chair, and I think those are things that we need to think about for people who are going to work at home for a longer period of time. The proper furniture, lighting, and work tools that they need. Also within retrofitting, I think there's opportunities to provide visual cues like tape, guide traffic flow, to think about having smaller meetings and new halls around how meetings happen, where they happen, how many people can occupy a space. I think another thing that's going to be really important for people being safe and feeling safe is to make cleaning not only a very frequent occurrence, but to have it be highly visible. I know I'll feel more comfortable if I have sanitizer wipes and sanitizer lotion around to be able to use on an ongoing basis. I know for some people, the idea of wearing masks is going to feel a little uncomfortable. In some countries, it's just a normal thing that you do during the cold and flu season. And so I know for Steelcase, that's something that we're going to be looking at and encouraging people to do in the beginning as we come back into the workplace. So that might be a new normal. If we can keep moving on, I'll try and go a little quicker. In the reconfigure stage, which would be near, as we have a little bit more time, we likely will have more people coming back into the office. We're hoping that we're going to be able to learn a lot more about how virus is transmitted. We know that researchers are working every day, obviously around the clock, to try and develop treatments and vaccines, but they're also trying to understand how the virus exists in the air, after somebody coughs or sneezes, and what happens when it lands on a surface. And so the more that we know about that, the more that that's going to help us make decisions for what's next. But if we keep going, Andrew, some ideas around that would be, maybe for people who've had or organizations who've had a lot of shared spaces, they might want to consider giving people a choice about whether they have a dedicated space when they come back into the office, if that's possible. And then if not, could they be reservable so you, again, know how long you've got that space and that you're the person using it. Cleaning is going to continue to be critically important. And even thinking about designing for disinfecting, there are a lot of really great materials that look beautiful, that can be employed in the workplace, that are also highly cleanable. And so those are going to be important things to think about. Also thinking about, the possibility of some of the screens that we might use actually being ways that we could help deflect the virus or maybe not have it spread out. We think that flexibility in terms of furniture and power will be critical in the near term and in the long term. So, are there furniture pieces that can easily be moved? There's mobile power solutions that can allow people to be able to move and to be able to distance themselves as much as possible. So maybe you could deploy some or redeploy some existing spaces. Large-scale collaboration devices are going to become even more important as some people come back into the office or travel is reduced for a longer period of time. I think we can look forward to spending more time in video kinds of exchanges. And so therefore having devices that are not only good to see people, but to see information and data, because if you have to solve a problem, you have to be able to see the problem as well as be able to see other people. So large scale devices will be important. I'm a huge fan of standing meetings. I hope this becomes a new thing we all adopt as part of our post-COVID response, because standing meetings, first of all, it allows you to just naturally distance yourself comfortably. You don't have to get up out of your chair. You can just easily move and separate. But the added benefit is that when you're standing, people actually have an increase in creativity, like 60% according to Stanford University. So I think standing meetings could become a really good new norm. Adopting agile practices, we could talk for a long time about that, but I'll just quickly say, along with the standing meeting, that's been a regular agile practice for those of you who have adopted those, and having those kinds of stand-up meetings, whether you're physically standing up or whether they're quick touch bases with your team virtually, can be important ways to help manage, again, the density. And there's a lot being talked about with contact tracing. It happens very different around the world. I was just talking to colleagues in China, and they literally have an app on their phone. And if they've been in a hot spot, the phone says it's red and you can't really come into the workplace, or if it's green, you're okay. That may unfold very differently in North America, but I think this is something that it's not too far down the road before that will be part of our workplace strategy as well. And I think the part that's really interesting is thinking about reinvention, like what happens in the longer term? Where do we go from there? We do really think that you're going to see some significant planning paradigm shifts, and I know Meg will talk a little bit more about that. But as we think about learning more from the sciences about how viruses, not just this coronavirus, but viruses in general, move throughout a workplace, and we think more about technologies that are emerging, I think it's going to open up some really interesting opportunities. And in particular, the idea of designing for adaptability. And Gail mentioned that, and when you think about how organizations are going to have to be resilient, it could be a pandemic, but it could also be a weather event if you live, say, in a hurricane zone, or other issues with climate change, for example. There's a lot of different things that we need to be prepared for, that we need to be able to be fluid and adaptable. So again, designing for adaptability, designing for as much hands-free as possible until there are other material solutions, but things that could be voice activated. We do think we'll see a lot of new material development and innovation coming out in this area, not only in terms of cleanability, but materials that could be more resistant to not only virus, but bacteria, of course. Sensors, there's already a lot of great opportunities for organizations that have installed sensing. A lot of it we thought about in terms of making sure our real estate was fully utilized. But what if we began to use those sensors for ways to be able to measure well-being within the workplace, ways for people to be able to navigate the workplace to not be in high traffic zones, ways to clean. We think inclusive design will be a really big trend moving forward. How do we make sure everybody is able to participate? We never want to have a workplace where it feels like it's just excluded to certain groups of people, so that's going to be important. Again, I already covered video. I think we're going to be living on that a lot more. And this notion that remote work is going to be a normal part of our ecosystem of spaces that we choose from when we come to work. And probably the biggest thing that we don't want to lose sight of is why we come to the workplace in the first place. And for a lot of us, we get our sense of community from the people that we work with. And we think that there's an opportunity in the future to be able to still create spaces where people can come together and feel a sense of belonging and purpose, and you feel a sense of the company's strategies. And you use virtual and real gatherings to help people have that sense of connection with each other going forward. Those are going to be really important things for us to consider. That was kind of a long answer to the question, but I hope that that was helpful.
Great, thank you so much, Chris. So we're going to move on. I'm seeing a lot of questions in the feed, so that's great. One more housekeeping thing. So we will be able to send out the deck that you're seeing here today. As well, we are recording this session. So if you're interested in getting the link of that, we can make sure we send out the recorded session for you too. So moving on, I'm seeing a lot of application related questions. So people are wanting to know what are the specific applications that we're thinking are going to reflect these considerations. So I'm going to pass it over to Meg Bennett for this. She can start off with a general overview of some of the applications that Steelcase has considered. And then I'm going to dive into some more specific questions, Meg, that I see in the comments here.
Perfect. Thank you, Bianca. So we do have a few design considerations and how we might apply some of that. So in the guide that we keep referencing, there are several key examples that start to illustrate what we've been talking about. What do you do first? Like how do you think about the now? How do you retrofit immediately? How do you start to bring your people back safely? That's kind of what all of our customers are asking us. And then we move forward to the retrofit to the reconfigure and reinvent. So some key considerations to really start to think about with your space are those things that both Chris and Gail mentioned, density, geometry, and division. So some things to start to think about as you are implementing those in each of the phases would be, when you're thinking about, like, density seems like the first one, right? Like, we're slowly starting to bring people back. We're doing the same thing. I'm sure a lot of organizations out there are thinking about, is it shift work? Is it bringing back a percentage of the population? Really just reducing that density is number one, because what we're doing is just keeping the quantity and the number of people down in any one place at any one time. And then how do we rearrange those spaces? How do you use orientation and just general arrangement of furniture to minimize some of that face-to-face interaction, and then adding screens, barriers, additional boundary within the workplace to make people feel both physically and kind of emotionally safe, as Chris referred to also. So I think if you advance the slides, you'll start to see some of our examples. So what we did in the guide was try to represent some of the most common workspaces that many of you have installed in your spaces today. So right here you can see a common work setting. So we kind of broke it down into height adjustable desks and benches and panel-based solutions. Here you see a height adjustable desk solution that's configured as a bench essentially. And this might be what the existing state looks like today. If you move forward one slide, you can start to see how you execute some of those elements of density, geometry, and division. So here what we've done is primarily added division. So luckily, if you look in the lower left-hand corner, you can kind of see the little circles represent a 6-foot circle. Assuming that I'm in the center of my 6-foot circle, I have control over a radius of 3 feet. The person adjacent to me has control over that radius of 3 feet. Together, through some individual responsibility and understanding of what is appropriate distancing, we can easily achieve that 6-foot distance apart. So the elements that you see incorporated here in both of these examples really are screening on the desk, and what we're showing here is a minimum of 24 inches high, which allows the screen to completely cover the face of most users, and then some user movable screening as well, so that you have some control over that environment that you're sitting in, some of those boundary elements that you can deploy as needed, whether it's for the person behind you or just traffic that's kind of moving and flowing around you as well. If you keep advancing, you'll start to see a handful of other recommendations for similar applications within the desking and benching categories. Next, here is a panel-based solution. So we've brought panel heights down tremendously over the last 5 to 10 years because the open office was really about bringing people together. It was about supporting teamwork and collaboration whenever and wherever possible. And we also found a lot of people weren't spending so much time at their desks. They didn't need so much real estate, and we didn't have as much paper as we've also had in the past. So individual spaces have been getting smaller and smaller. Density has been going up and up. So if you move forward to the next slide, you'll start to see how with that same kit of parts, you can start to, again, immediately retrofit with some supplemental elements. So we've added some additional screening to the desk. We've executed that concept of geometry that we talked about. So we rotated the desk 90 degrees to eliminate that face-to-face again, and added a marker board as well to provide some of that on-demand division between users. Here's another panel example. So what we're doing is adding additional panels here to bring even more enclosure to the individual, more control over your surroundings. And the beauty of modular furniture, as it always has been, is you can kind of add and subtract these elements relatively easily. One of the things that we're hearing from our customers is they don't know if these solutions necessarily need to be short-term or long-term. Are we looking at things that want to be more temporary or want to be more permanent? So what we've done is done some exploration to lay out an array of solutions that allow you to understand what some of the possibility is and do some selection as it best suits your needs and your organization and the way your people come together. Yeah, thank you for moving on. So a few more panel-based examples of just, again, execution of division, geometry, in ensuring that you have that physical distancing, that density in place. The last example is ancillary. So think about a lot of those in between shared spaces. Here we just have one lounge example. And this is, again, where some modularity is going to really help us execute some of the distancing recommendations here. So if you move forward to the next slide, what we've done is reconfigured this by adding some additional elements into the configuration. So we've created some spacing between the seating by adding some table elements, thereby achieving that physical distance that we're trying to seek of 6 feet or a minimum of 2 meters. We've also added some division. So there's some screening that allows the individuals to gain that sense of control and privacy over their space. Some storage and some further division. Gives you a great place to store some of those cleaning supplies or PPE supplies that you might want kind of accessible everywhere in your environment. So again, like, it's implementing those same little strategies, those same design considerations to different scales and different degrees in several places, but they're scalable in all of the environments across or throughout the workplace. Here's a final example of that same ancillary or lounge space with additional boundary in between, and we broke up the space even more so there's more individual seats versus things that people could potentially use for 2 and 3 people, and then added some individual Lagunitas little nooks as well, so that lounge environment becomes fully secure. And then again, the guide has several additional examples of how you can execute all of those strategies throughout the variety of ancillary spaces in your environment.
That's great. Thanks so much.
There we go.
Yeah, thanks, Meg. So again, a lot of questions coming in on applications. So I'm thinking that, Gail, I may ask you this one more on a macro trend scale. Are we seeing the idea and the concept of benching going away completely, or is it going to be more an adapting situation that Meg just described? You're on mute, Gail, just so you know.
I'd be happy to jump in if Gail is having a little bit of trouble. Benching is definitely not going away, just like ancillary or shared spaces are not going away. And we don't necessarily want them to, you know, like, those environments were developed for lots of really great reasons, and they support teamwork in really good ways. I think the intention is to execute some of these strategies in the design considerations that we referred to before, to make them more physically and emotionally safe for users, and ensure that we have proper distancing in place. And again, Chris talked about, like, long term. I think that's another, like, really good thing to think about in terms of what would your goal be relative to the solutions throughout your space. That goal is to become more adaptable, so that you can be more responsive regardless of what the upcoming need might be. The bench itself has the opportunity to incorporate more elements of flexibility. So if you have something that's spine-based and the elements or the tables are reconfigurable such that you can change the orientation, you can pull them apart quickly and easily, you have access to all the tools and the power that you need, I think we'll see an evolution of benching.
Great, thanks so much, Meg.
Yeah.
One of the questions that I do want to forward on to Gail is more about the collaboration spaces. So it looks like you're unmuted here, Gail. If you want to talk about the lunchroom spaces and the collaboration spaces, that'd be great.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks, Meg, for jumping in of all the times to have a key that won't work. The what to do with lunch spaces is something, again, that a lot of people are asking us about, and we are working with a number of outside experts, food services people, because it's a big issue for them as well. So honestly, the same 3 design considerations that Meg went into detail on in terms of density, geometry, and division, they actually apply equally well to lunch spaces or other common areas. And so the idea of figuring out how you simply just have fewer tables in there, whether you remove them or you mark them off, the idea of thinking about how you may not have any more than 4 people sitting at any one table in order to, and even 4 is quite large, but in order to allow them the distance that at the moment we think is correct. And the idea of, again, applying some division between them so that people just physically feel more comfortable when they're in a space. You know, one in particular is one that Chris mentioned about people having something behind them. You know, one of the things that we've seen, particularly in China, there's a lot of division that is in front and to the side, and not always enough behind. And we know that sometimes that's part of it that make people feel a little bit unsafe, particularly when they're in a lunch area where they're actually removing their masks. So this is one of the things that we just started to think about the other day, is when you do go in and you sit down and you remove your mask, what do you do with it? And how do you make sure that everything about having a mask, taking it off and on, and where you store it? So, are issues to think about. So one of the things that we're doing, just so you know, this is looking at the practices that we've had in our factories, because we've had to think about all of these things in the factory. And so we are learning from that. We are also going to be issuing some more information just on what are the things that we've learned, what are the things that we're learning, not only as we talk to outside experts, but we're actually applying to our own space, and to be as helpful as we can. Within the next week or so, we'll be able to publish those, and ideally also give you some examples of lunch spaces, cafe spaces where some of these things need to change, including things like, do you have one entrance, one exit? You know, how do you show people how they enter the space, or how you control how many people are in there? You know, we really believe that one of the most important things right now is, how do you make your people feel confident? You know, confident that as an organization, you've done everything possible to help them be as safe as we can. And so we think that the more you make all of these things highly visible to them, and, you know, the idea of having to queue outside of the entrance into the cafe may feel awkward. And yet at the same time, if it's giving people that confidence that we're doing all the things we need to, as well as the things around density, geometry, division, as well as making personal cleaning devices and tools readily available to everybody. And again, as we see more around the world and we learn more, we will be publishing that as fast as we can.
Great, thanks, Gail. So one of the next questions that we have, I'm actually going to direct to Julie Hicks from POI. So it's coming from Patricia at Home Trust, and she's wondering, you know, what about the projects that have been planned but not 100% finished being built out? Does Steelcase or POI recommend, you know, taking a second look at the layout and seeing what can be done? You're on mute, Julie, just so you know.
Thanks, Bianca. Hi, Patricia. I think, you know, given some of the things that have been talked about with the, you know, reconfiguring the geometry and the density, those projects that are sort of a work in progress or halfway there, I think it's a great time to look at those kind of things, because when you're starting to talk about especially the geometry of the space and where to place people, it might be an opportunity to look at those traffic flow patterns and look at the density in your space and make some decisions around, you know, how could we reposition this? Is there a different way we could lay this out? You saw in some of Meg's options there where just turning people so that they're not face-to-face, that they're back-to-back, giving opportunities to add in some division in those types of scenarios. It's definitely worth talking about and overlaying that against some of the other things that you're doing in your space with respect to traffic flow and density and all those great things. So yeah, we're happy to jump in and help you out and have a look at that. And we do have a number of customers who are in fact reaching out to say, okay, how can we collaborate on sort of a now solution, and even something that can take us into a little bit into the near too. Great question.
Awesome, thanks, Julie. So the next one, actually, I think I'm going to, turn it over to Nick DiGiulio if he's available to answer it. So it's really about the POI strategy of, first of all, going back into the office yourself. So what strategy are you taking? But then as well, when we're going out to our clients on a day-to-day basis to fix issues or to install, what type of safety measures will our employees be taking when they enter in the sites?
Thanks, Bianca. POI, in terms of coming back to the office, we've struck a team of people that are working right now on figuring out the best way to come back. We know that in Ontario, May 19th is a date that has been set that possibly people can come back to the office. So we're working towards that, and we'll be communicating with our own staff in terms of what our strategy is. There's a lot of considerations based on the fact that people have children. People may not feel comfortable coming back to the workforce of the office. They may have people at home that may be compromised. So there's a lot of things that have to be taken into consideration when inviting people to come back to the office to work. In terms of what we are doing with our install staff, we're going basically through, we have a list of protocols that we can share with our clients. It's pretty stringent, but the net of it is we need to protect both our people and our clients' staff. So we have a whole bunch of protocols in place in terms of how many people can go in a truck, what do you do when you get to site, making sure you have the proper PPE equipment, making sure you keep the right distancing, not sharing tools, etc. So those are some of the things. But if someone would like to have our protocol shared, please let us know, and we would be able to share that with you.
Great, thanks, Nick. So moving on, we have our next question. So for our clients where our workstations are already all custom Steelcase pieces, they're trying to figure out how can we retrofit for our specific setup. So is there anything we can do without reconfiguring the whole setup? And there was also another question, about screens and what's readily available right now. So I'm going to turn that over to Fatima from POI, who can discuss some solutions based on that.
Hi, thank you, Bianca. We have curated a host of screens and products that are available now, and we will be sharing that with you in an upcoming session of what we can offer you today to help augment your existing work settings. So I'd encourage you to reach out to your account manager to allow us to have those discussions with you to determine what will be the right solution for your particular workstation. We'll bring samples, we'll have an understanding of what we can provide to you, as well as some of the strategies with density. So putting screens on every workstation might not be the right solution. If you can't reconfigure something to turn it away, perhaps you only have 2 individuals sitting at a bench of 4. So we will work through with you to find not only the right solution, but to help you with your overall strategy that you've determined for your organization to bring folks back to the workplace.
Great, thanks so much, Fatima. The next question is on cleanability. So we have some questions on whether or not Steelcase will discontinue certain fabrics that aren't safe, or if there are any thoughts on antimicrobial materials or any specific fabrics that are best for cleaning. So if I can throw that over to either Julie or Fatima. Julie, are you okay answering that?
Thanks, Bianca. I'm not on mute this time. Yeah, the materials that are available for cleaning, the whole idea around cleaning and disinfecting is a big conversation right now. There's sort of 3 pieces to that. There's the cleaning, the sanitizing, and the disinfecting that we have to look at. And then there's that other conversation around antimicrobial surfaces as well, antimicrobial fabrics and products. Cleaning essentially is it's going to remove some of the germs from the surfaces, but cleaning obviously is not going to kill those germs. So we have to consider that when we're thinking about cleanability, really what it's doing. There is some, it does lower a little bit of the spread by just cleaning, but we really need to do more. Sanitizing also is it's lowering the germs on the surface and taking them down to, you know, sort of public health standards. But really, it's the disinfecting that's going to kill those germs. And disinfecting is usually through the use of chemicals, bleach, that kind of thing. And those are going to more significantly reduce the spread of those germs. Antimicrobial surfaces, sort of an interesting one. It's those antimicrobial surfaces are surfaces that have had sort of a chemical application that is toxic to microorganisms. And really those organisms are things such as bacteria and fungi. There's not really a lot of proven research that indicates that those antimicrobial surfaces are doing much for these viruses, and definitely no proven research on COVID-19. So really we're looking at, you know, these surfaces and how they can be disinfected to kill some of these germs on the surfaces. And a lot of fabrics and materials, especially the Steelcase products, have information about them that will tell you how it is cleanable and by what products it's cleanable with. And many of them are in fact cleanable with things like bleach solutions, the 10-to-1 water and bleach solutions, and all that information is available. So if you are concerned about surfaces or materials that you have in your space and want to know how you can disinfect and clean them, that's something that we can definitely give you on an individual material basis to help you figure out how to best disinfect your surfaces. But we don't have to throw everything out because it's not antimicrobial or you know, it's not cleanable. There are a huge amount of items that are cleanable, and more research is going to be doing. There's a lot more materials like silver and copper and different materials that are naturally they naturally repel or don't allow organisms to grow on them. So as that research and that information comes out and we can integrate some of those things into materials, they'll be that information will be made readily available for you.
Great. Thanks so much, Julie. So we have time for a few more questions. One of the ones that I want to direct to Gail next is, it seems that some of our solutions are focused on a lot of the physical intervention, of course, which is removing furniture or reconfiguring it. But some of the considerations we also have to take, you know, most physical distancing parameters are also revolving around protocols and reducing behavior or modifying it. So can you elaborate on how we can, you know, use a blend of that physical protocols and, you know, what we're proposing here today to create really the most ideal safe office for the return of employees?
Yeah, thank you, Bianca. You know, I'm actually reading the question too, and it's a really good question. In fact, if you know others can see that question, it's also a very honest question, because it goes on to say, is it a bit self-serving for Steelcase or POI to be suggesting that everything is around adding new panels? So I wanted to address that because that's a super honest question. Thank you. And I'll give you a really honest answer. And you know, that honest answer is, we did spend a lot of time, you know, wondering, is the answer here the behavioral things that you suggested, which, yeah, it is. It's understanding, you know, how to keep our distance from each other. It's probably understanding how to do that in combination with masks. Now, is there a part of it that the environment can play when you're actually putting in barriers? So, you know, we wondered that, and we asked the same question. And the answer that we got really has been coming from a lot of our customers. And, you know, we didn't want to just come right out and ever look as though, hey, this is a time when we can all sell panels again. Because frankly, I'm not sure that there's any of us who want to go back to certainly what I sat in the early 80s, where I was totally enveloped with panels. So that, you know, I please don't think that is us suggesting this because it's a means of us generating business. It's really more in response to a lot of customers around the world saying, can you please show us how we could add to what we have now in a way that helps our people feel safer? And sometimes that's just adding something on top. Sometimes it's suggesting, plexiglass be added, and other times it's saying, no, I feel that we need more of a barrier between people, which is where you see some of those ideas about panels. Frankly, as we look around the world, and honestly, it's something I do every morning. I have meetings where I get an assessment or patterns that are emerging in Asia, as well as Europe, as well as the patterns that we see in Canada or anywhere in the Americas, because we are trying to see how much our customers actually do want to do that versus just remaining with some of the distancing and behavioral things. And I'll tell you, the pattern that we see right now, there's a divide. And for every organization that says, I want to put those barriers in, we see others who are saying, no, we don't have the capital to do it right now, or we don't know that that's the right thing to do right now, and they're waiting. So, what we want to be able to help with is that kind of information that I just gave you right now, that as we learn from customers and we learn from the design firms who are working with their customers, as we look around the world, we do want to help gauge what people are doing. We always want to be able to supply a thoughtful answer, but we do want it to be responsible. And responsible for us means being able to say, yeah, if you want those barriers, here they are. If you don't want them, then that's part of the thinking that went into us even just talking about the density and geometry, as well as that division part, because not all of those three things always have to be applied equally. And so sometimes for some organizations, if it's about just the understanding the social behaviors or protocols and combining that with just people keeping their distance, that's great too. I mean, we will not make a lot of money off of selling a lot of panels that approach or that address some of these issues. Our hope is that if we keep staying on top of what's going on and understanding what really can make a difference or doesn't make a difference, we will be honest enough to share all of that with you.
Great. Thank you so much, Gail. So it looks like that is all the time we have for questions. So one thing that I will commit to everybody here is there are still a lot of questions in our feed, and we'll make sure to capture all of these and provide a very thoughtful response in our follow-up. So you can look for a follow-up, either it's a PDF or document where we can outline our response to everything. But for the last 2 minutes, I would like to transition it back to Nick to close it out and to let you know about what's coming next.
Thanks, Bianca. Yeah, great session. Gail, Meg, Julie, Fatima, Chris, and great job, Bianca, being the host. In the next while, we're going to continue to do seminars on a weekly basis. Some of them will be about quick hit solutions, which will be our first one, which will probably be the day after the Victoria Day holiday. And you will get an invite to that. They'll probably be a little bit shorter, 30 minutes or so. We have a series of them set up. I'm not going to specifically go through them. They probably will change because, as Gail mentioned, Steelcase is doing a ton of research and stuff is coming out from them every day, and we want to keep clients at the forefront of what the research is that Steelcase has. So watch out for those invites. Really appreciate everyone taking the time to spend with us. Again, as Bianca said, we are going to go through those questions and get answers for you, and we'll send them out. I've also received a few personal ones already, and we'll get back to those folks as well. So thanks to everybody for joining. Thanks to the Steelcase team, and have a great day.